my next guest is Bucolo. Hello. Hi,
Hello,
I'm
Silvia.
Ferraris.
It's a pleasure to meet you virtually.
Nice to meet you. So I've been talking with Ilpo Koskinen before you, and I'm welcoming you to our 24-hour conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, it's night here in Italy.
Yes, very early there for you. It's a lovely morning here in Brisbane, Australia.
So let me just say to who is listening that Sam Bucolo is adjunct professor at the School of Design of Swinburne University, Australia.
Correct.
So we have been experiencing the same kind of disruptive change in our lives all around the world because of COVID-19. And so through our chat, we are kind of collecting experiences and of how we have been dealing with it in our profession, in our teaching, and depending on what we have been up to. And so what about you? What was it for you?
So look, it's obviously been a very challenging time, and Australia, like so many other nations, has been impacted by COVID-19. And luckily, our response has been minimised a lot because of what we did early on. And I think that was a really interesting part on how it's impacted our society. We closed our borders early. We as a society stuck to the strict lockdown measures that we actually did. But the flip side of that was it had an immediate impact on our economy. And what I've been interested in is following how designers have actually followed or adapted to helping businesses to do that. And this has been really my work around diversify, which I want to chat to you today. Mm-hmm. It's really shown how we can be quite resilient as a both society, but really how design actually starts to step up and actually start looking at different ways of actually supporting businesses. And I just want to go through some different models with you today.
Mm-hmm. And so it is this reading comes from your expertise. So,
yes, very much so. And so, my research really and my practice, I've been an academic for about 25 years, but in and out of actually working with industries and businesses to really build design capability in their organizations to drive growth and opportunities. And that's really where I suppose my first point would be, inside it, the first thing we saw in COVID-19, especially with our various businesses, was businesses had to be locked down, and with that, it impacted how they actually work with their customers in a very different way. The most simple example would be food service industries. So restaurants and what have you, globally in Australia, I can focus on, didn't have customers anymore. And they needed to figure out new ways to actually, how would you actually work towards actually servicing those new customers? And I gave a presentation really early on in the lockdown period and saying to their own businesses, well, if your business is actually feeling stressed, so is your customers. And do you really understand what that change is? And this is a good opportunity for you to reconnect with your customers to understand their challenges. What are their pain points that they're facing? And we saw a lot of these businesses quite quickly, food industry in particular, go, we're wanting to transition out of food service into takeaway. But not just takeaway, but fine dining takeaway. What does that look like? How do we pivot our business models to do that? And design played a large role in actually both understanding that customer need, but then also mapping back inside the organization. How do we deliver on that experience by not taking away from our purpose of a fine dining restaurant? And how do we translate that into home? And I think that's the very most simple example of what design's been able to achieve in a very short amount of time.
Yes. I think we had the same issues, of course, and we are seeing our businesses adapting. Maybe not all have been as fast, and some are suffering more than others. I guess they're doing it mostly by themselves. We have a lot of small businesses, so I mean they have to deal with by themselves. They don't have support.
And I think this has been the interesting part. And again, in Australia, same thing. We have a lot of small businesses, and we have a lot of internal design roles rather than agencies supporting these small businesses. And I think this is a very strong makeup of our community or our business type. And so you've got design capability inside organization that might have been traditionally, focused on graphics or focused on communication or product, depending on the industry. And some of the work I was doing in actually getting businesses to say, well, you could redeploy that design capability to go out and actually understand that customer need a lot better than what you normally had. And we see this a lot, that reluctance to challenge their own thinking about what their customer need is. What COVID-19 did was our customers have changed from their business sense. Those who are successful were the ones who are able to actually connect with them and understand that challenge. They really redeployed their own internal capability to start shifting how they might have seen design as a mechanism to create assets, communications or what have you, to actually understanding and framing problems.
Yes, I think some businesses have. All different businesses had different challenges. So some had to completely lock down for us, and only now we can go back at eating in restaurants, but with distance. And but people are not going because they're still scared. So that's one topic. On one hand, what you can do and what you feel like doing, and
and I think this is quite interesting because we talk about there's been that whole relief stage. So and a lot of our countries are still in that. Australia is slowly coming out of that. So how do we actually help those businesses, in get through that initial phase of that lockdown, challenging, some massive impact of job losses of their businesses. But we're now moving into that reset phase. So as we start to come out of that, and Australia is very much in that phase, starting to transition out for the moment. What's been interesting is some of those business models which they looked at in that initial lockdown phase are starting to stick and continue on outside of that. And I think that's going to be quite an interesting thing to follow through. How does the crisis actually leads to actually, creative thinking in what can be achieved? So this notion, and I think this goes back to your point, yes, we still have people who don't want to eat out or, returning to work. They prefer to work from home still. How do we still actually enable those interim business models to actually start scaling out into back to our new normal? And what would that look like? And how do we continue to support those businesses?
I think we are all wondering if we ever really go back to before. Really, maybe not. Maybe it's not possible even.
And again, I think this is this notion of being able to be open-minded to what that looks like, and this is that resilience, I suppose, that we've been seeing inside our businesses and inside our communities. Who would have thought, when we locked down our schools and universities, probably 12 weeks ago, that we'd move to a whole online platform. I remember those discussions being in place for many years, that we could never have, just online learning. It couldn't be achieved in studio teaching. But somehow in this short period of time, with that crisis, we forced ourselves to actually experiment and say, what does this look like? We didn't get it right, but we did actually adapt our systems and our process and aligned ourselves to achieve some pretty amazing things. Question is, do we want them to continue? And is that our new normal? Or do we want to go back to our old ways?
Yeah, I hope. I mean, we are discussing, of course, this topic about the education next semester, but later on also. And I guess the best would be to make the best of what we have learned in this experience, because each of us was forced. Not all of us are very keen to use these technologies that are available, but as you said, in very, very short time, we really adapted. So
Yep.
each of us learned something new. And I guess even myself, I will never go back exactly to what I was doing before. I have new ways of doing things that certainly work better. So.
And I think this is a great opportunity to celebrate, you know, as designers talk about, you know, experimental mindsets. I mean, this has been one massive experiment that we didn't actually ask for, and it's unfortunate that the impact it's had on many people and communities.
Yes.
But this notion of we should be able to actually move to a world where experimentation is okay, and failure at such a large level, you know, with massive systems. I've never seen that in my lifetime of what we've just gone through. And for me, that I would be hoping would be part of our new normal. Not so much the systems we've just developed, but that ability to experiment and actually make changes. I think there's a real opportunity, and this gives a great affordance to what design can achieve, and actually working with these systems. Because that's, I suppose, the second point I really wanted to bring up was the other big impact we had was in our society and in Australia, and again, like many other countries, our supply chains were really impacted. Yeah, so we had this mass panic buying of hand sanitizers and masks and personal protection equipment, ventilators, and it really shone a light back on our own capability, our sovereign capability, to provide these things, and it caused panic inside our society and inside our governments, and it showed the fragility of our supply chains.
Yes.
And what happened was, by government actually, you know, aligning to a problem and putting out a challenge to manufacturing in particular, which design was part of, to quickly adapt and actually solve some very complex problems, to pivot. You know, I haven't seen that before. That level of collaboration, all working towards a common purpose. And for me, that was quite exciting to see. But again, I come back to this now and go, how do we now build upon that capability we've now got? It wasn't just a one-off. For the problems we do see going forward, how do we take that mindset and actually start to solve those problems in the same way? And that's something we haven't actually seen before.
Yes. I wonder if, of course, the emergency had let people behave in ways they wouldn't normally, even at level of generosity and willingness to share. And well, we will see what will be when we go back to normal, if we ever will go back to normal. I don't know.
But yep, you go. Sorry.
Yeah, because I was discussing this with Ilpo before also. I noticed that between us, the colleagues at Politecnico, we have helped each other a lot about how to use platforms and so on, and been sharing very, very, you know, like a community.
Yeah.
And it felt good. I hope this will remain, you know.
And I think, you know, this notion you stress any system, and it drives people to new ways of working or thinking or sharing. I keep coming back down to and reflecting again, going back to design education. You know, these are the qualities and capabilities we ask of our students every day. You know, that ability to collaborate and actually bring together people with disparate views, to go beyond and envisage different ways of working. Now, there's been a great opportunity to do that over the past 3-4 months in this lockdown period. I'm interested to see, how does design now take this forward? How do we go back and saying there is a profession out there of individuals who can help with this?
Yes. So is diversify ingredient of a solution for the future?
I think by necessity, diversify was what's happened, and now we need to continue to build upon that. And this is, I suppose, the third point. I really, because as I said, the last two examples I talked about, whether a business has to adapt to work to a new customer, that was out of necessity. Or we've now got, working on building new ventilator capability inside a country. Again, that was actually by necessity as part of actually how we had to manage the pandemic lockdowns. But there's this new way of actually where we start to reset our economy. And that's the future I'm excited by. We will eventually come out of this. How do we actually start to look at these new industries that we will need? So in Australia, our economy is made up of agriculture, mining, tourism, education, agriculture. Tourism and education have massive impacts. We just can't rely on the way they used to deliver on our national prosperity. The question then is, what would be those new industries? How do we diversify these new industries? What's the role of design in actually diversifying these new industries? Many years ago, I did a lot of research on how do you diversify businesses and business models through design. And I was using the Danish design ladder, which you may know the 4 steps of the Danish design ladder. And I added 2 additional steps in there. And one was actually about organizational transformation, and one was about sector level transformation. And this notion, how does design actually lead to transforming a sector, diversifying it, to understand what are the opportunities and what are the industries? So we have all these comparative advantage of our industries. How do you turn them into competitive businesses? I think what's happened in this pandemic is we've shone a light on that we need different industries. We need different measures of success. We need different values in those future industries. In the work I've been doing, design is actually one of the few industries that can envisage that future and actually make sure that actually design is baked into these future businesses going forward. That's an exciting part, but it does mean designers have to, I suppose, step up as well to this challenge. So I'm quite optimistic, I would say.
Yes. So you're saying designers should be part of this.
I think they can. Yeah, I don't think they should be waiting, and I think they've been given an opportunity to look at what they've been doing at a micro level, and start to apply to macro thinking.
Do you think is something designers are able to do, or are designers more keen to look at problems, try to solve them, with a purpose, rather than look at the big picture,
Yeah. And I suppose there's many different strands of design. But I still think at its core, design has that ability to envisage and go beyond today, to bring in contradictions, to bring multiple people together, to work around a common purpose. I don't think designers are the only people that can do this. They're not. They're part of the solution rather than the solution.
Do you think designers would be taken seriously by the others?
Again, some of the work we're doing here, very much so. I think, again, based on how designs helped shift supply chains, designing ventilators from technology that they hadn't had in the past, and being able to actually bring together groups of people, disparate people, to focus, to execute, and to deliver. That's what we've seen in Australia. Some really good examples of how designers have actually helped with that. I think that's given a new level of respect to what design can achieve.
Yes, yes.
Now, I think the flip side of that is designers will need to raise to the challenge.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And I think our education.
I wonder if young students who decide to pursue this kind of studies, what are they looking for? Are they looking to solve the big problems, or design the next table?
Yeah. It's a good question, and I think we can't be prescriptive on what a student would like to come to. I still come back down to design has a role in society to play. It always has. If you go back to how design was done in the Scandinavian countries from the 60s in the early 20s, what design did to Italy in the manufacturing and the fashion communities, it wasn't just around artifacts. It actually stimulated whole new opportunities for the economy collectively. I would like to see a greater importance placed on that, and understanding that when you're designing a table, it's not just the table, it's part of a supply chain. It's part of delivering on a competitive advantage for that nation. It's about building skills and capabilities in small SMEs that may never know about design. I think this connection as part of a larger ecosystem is what I would like to see coming or amplified more going further. And I think through the COVID challenges we've seen, you can actually start to see how design actually has now started to make some stronger connections back into solving some real issues for the economy and its citizens, rather than just going back and actually solving a small problem.
Yes, so, I think we as a scholar, we know that designer can do more. I was just wondering, what do young people think? But I think they are looking for that too, because they have examples and they have goals. I mean, and yeah, I think some of them already start this kind of studies looking for this kind of challenges.
Yeah, and I think we can help as educators, definitely help bring that awareness both to them, but I think also to the businesses that they work with, the engagement, whether they be for not-for-profit, service sector. It doesn't have to be manufacturing-only communities. Design can play a role in understanding how it delivers value right back around cultural value, social value, economic value, and having that dialogue with our students and that language that they're able to articulate their value beyond just the artifact and actually to the wider community is something I haven't seen. It's really focused on in many design schools. It's there, but I think we can amplify it.
You said you work with industry, not just in academy, right?
Yes, correct.
And is this also partnership with school when you do your maybe some teaching?
In the past, most definitely. This is something that we've been wanting to spend more time on doing around that. Now, it's design-led innovation. So there's lots of innovation happening in business. And design is often seen at the end of that innovation cycle.
Yeah.
So how do you bring design at the start of that? How do you actually use design to actually frame a problem, frame the opportunity, frame the business model?
Yes.
So a lot of the work I've been doing at a business level is actually bringing design up to that conversation. But it just scales up. So if you can do it at a business, or you can do it at a community. You can do it at a community. You can actually do it at a state. You can do it at a state. You can actually do it at a nation. And so I've been trying to figure out, where does design start to play a role, but also break. And some of the conversations I'm doing at the moment, is really working at that nation level on some of the future industries we'd be looking at. And design is being asked. What I've seen is design is able to answer questions that other professions can't.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, and certainly, in a way, this challenge we are facing is also an opportunity to change, also to explain what's the design profession and what it can do. Maybe, going beyond what is traditionally thought to be.
Look, it's not easy, and I, again, without criticizing the design community, often that time is, if there's an opportunity, do we want to intake it? I think your question around, do students want this, is a really important one, and we have to remind ourselves, why do students come into the design? But I think there's also the flip side of that is, if there's opportunities for this, who will do it? And is this a new strand? Is this an evolution of design? Is it just actually a reminder of where design may have come from?
Yeah.
Because we do see this over history. Design has played this role in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I go back to the UK Design Council, where it started. It actually came out of Winston Churchill war efforts relief.
Mm-hmm.
So that was where the original thinking came from, that they needed design to actually really stimulate what that future economy might be. Mm-hmm. In Australia, we've got similar activities that was done by the Industrial Design Council of Australia back in 1958. Mm-hmm. Again, it was actually that post-war era.
That comes after the crisis.
After a crisis.
Yes, yes.
And I'm wondering where this crisis has affected so many globally. Mm-hmm. How do we actually go back to some of those original thinking?
Some new energy is born from something like that. We need to channel it.
Yeah.
Directions.
And I think as scholars and as a discipline or profession, it's part of our role to actually drive, design for all, takes on that meaning, design for national prosperity. That's what we're wanting to achieve. How do we raise the standard of living for those who have really been challenged? And that's what excites me.
We are also discovering that we can teach even in different time zones. Students are willing to do it at night, and so it's really a small world now.
And look, I have to say, when this happened, I was part of the, and I heard you had Srini Sharanthi from the World Design Organization on earlier. Mm-hmm. Louisa Colina was interviewing him. And I was part of this World Design Organization Design Challenge. IBM was part of, and we were looking at these design challenges that had been put out. And within 48 hours, we had, I think, in that whole challenge, 1,800 designers from across the globe volunteering their time to solve a problem. So I was working with groups in India and China, in I think the Philippines, and Australia and New Zealand, who'd just come together and had a common language and that ability to say, we can actually deliver on a solution. The group I was working on was on vulnerable communities, and we ended up doing work on domestic violence, which was a really challenging topic that was actually being exacerbated through the lockdown.
Yes.
But we used our collective intelligence and our own understanding of our cultural differences to come together and actually try to solve something that was much greater than just for ourselves. Yeah. I was really inspired by that process.
Yes.
And I think we can use that a lot more going forward.
Yes. Yeah. Even this little, let's say, 24-hour talks comes with the idea of, don't miss the chance to discuss about what's going on, and
And I commend you for doing this, and I think bringing the world closer. That we can't get on planes anymore and just give lectures, or we can't just actually have symposium or conferences, but we can do this.
Yeah.
And then the fact that you used 2 weeks ago, a week ago, this was set up in my mind, and you were able to pull it together. I think there is community that designers out there wanting to work together, and I commend you for actually bringing it together.
Yes, so it was really a pleasure meeting you and having you here as a guest.
Sylvia, thank you very much. I know it's very late for you.
Yeah, the conversation keeps going on, so you're welcome to listen to the next. And so bye-bye, ciao. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.